Started running a little bit behind, and go ahead and finish up your lunches. At least we have an audience with a partially full stomach, so. Can I ask someone to pull the doors in the back, please? It is my great honor today to introduce to you our keynote speaker who's come a long ways for this conference, traveling here from Afghanistan, arrived in Dulles Airport early this morning at 6 o'clock without any sleep, has come immediately from the airport to Jamestown's event today. We're extremely delighted to have someone of such importance to speak at our annual conference. Amrullah Saleh served as the former head of Afghanistan's National Directorate of Security from 2004 to 2010. He left that post in June 2010. Prior to that, he was the he led the Department 1 of NDS, whose duties included liaison with the foreign minister, diplomatic and intelligence organizations, including those of the United States. In 1997, at the age of 24, he was appointed by the notoriously and very well-known and perhaps one of the world's greatest guerrilla commanders, Ahmad Shah Massoud. And he was asked by Ahmad Shah Massoud to head the Afghan Northern Alliance's offices in Dushanbe, Tajikistan. He served as an informal ambassador and coordinator of non-governmental organizations that handled contacts directly within Central Intelligence Agency. After the fall of the Taliban, he returned to Afghanistan and helped rebuild the country's intelligence organization. He was born in the province of Panjshir in 1972 and holds an honorary doctorate degree in analysis science from Clearly University. When I was speaking with Mr. Saleh today, we were talking about his education background, and he commented that I was born of war, and I never had a chance to attend a university because I was busy working and securing and defending the rights of his people from the native Panjshiri Valley. He's certainly someone that has created a great interest in Washington. He's very well respected by officials in and outside of the U.S. government, and General Hayden was extremely happy to hear that Mr. Saleh was coming today to speak at this conference, and he noted several occasions that Mr. Saleh is extremely well respected here. And so on that note, I'd like to turn the floor over to Amrullah Saleh, our keynote speaker today. He will be taking a few questions and answers after he speaks. Amrullah.
Thank you very much for clapping before I started to speak. In countries like Afghanistan, people do not clap for intelligence chiefs, so I'm not used to it a lot. As I looked around, I see no clock, so it means I can talk as much as I like. But if I do talk a lot, please stop me. I have no prepared speech, and English is not my first language. And I want to speak to you from a very pure local and Afghan perspective. So bear with me. I will be very brief, reviewing the past 9 years, very brief. And then I will focus what is going on now and what is the way forward through lens of an Afghan. I was in Afghanistan when September 11 happened. So when we first saw Americans in our area, that's what I call phase 1, 2001. They say we want to defeat the enemy. And the enemy is Al-Qaeda, Taliban, and we partner with United States to defeat the enemy. It is a very popular cause, and the enemy crumbles in less than 2 months, and Kabul is conquered, we go there. So phase 1 is very short phase. and the enemy cannot resist because of the might of the US military and also the Afghan boots on the ground and the very good coordination that was between us. Phase 2, in phase 1, there was one assumption that Pakistan is an ally. So when we push the Taliban out of the Afghan borders, they will be taken care of from the other side of the border. Then starts phase 2, and phase 2 is a state building. During the phase 2, as you all know, the Afghans did their homework. We had the constitutional lawyer Jirgan, the democratic process was launched. Things were going very well, and Pakistan was still keeping the Taliban in hibernation, and they were not unleashed, re-unleashed. And that continued until late 2005. And late 2005, institution building starts in Afghanistan, and I call it phase 3. In phase 3, a mistake was made with the approach of lead nation theory, every donor nation taking the responsibility to build capacity for a specific Afghan institution. United States takes the responsibility for building the Afghan National Army, Germany the Afghan National Police, United Kingdom takes the responsibility for narcotics eradication, Italy takes the responsibility for judiciary reform. They soon find out, after a year or so, that this stovepipe strategy is not going to lead to creation of a cohesive state. And now everybody regrets why we wasted so many years in that approach, because the result was not the results we all desired and liked. It is during the launch of this approach, lead nation, that Taliban re-emerge. They had already come back, but they had concentrated in the remotest parts of the country, in the villages, exploiting the lack and presence of the government. And they were able to establish, as I said, small bases in areas which were not significant. By being there, Taliban did not pose any significant threat to the Afghan state or the reconstruction process or the presence of the international forces. So everybody was of the opinion they are an irrelevant force, they are gone, they are defeated. If they are in the villages, they will not be able to become a strategic threat. And it is still the time people believe Musharraf is not, as the previous speakers said, a double game player. They all thought he was a honest strategic ally of the United States. A lot of the things I wanted to say, the distinguished journalist from Republic out-literatured me, and I fully agree with his description of the game the establishment in Pakistan plays. So it is 2006, middle of 2006, when the attention of United States, I wouldn't say is diverted, it is a split between Iraq and Afghanistan, and Iraq takes the bulk of the US attention. Taliban re-emerge as a strategic threat. What do I mean by strategic threat? They are able to make the highways insecure, they are able to attack district centers, they are able to attack FOBs, they are able to intimidate people in the cities, and intelligence picture becomes more clear that they have established bases in Afghanistan. At this point of time, the commander of NATO in Afghanistan was General Richards. And he launched his famous Operation Medusa. The aim of Operation Medusa was to uproot the Taliban from their known bases in southern Kandahar. Yes, the Taliban were uprooted from 2-3 districts, but General Richards did not have sufficient resources or manpower to pursue them further. So because he did not have enough soldiers, enough resources, he came to the Afghan government and said, let us have a changed strategy. Let us have Afghan development zones, what we call ADZ approach. And he said, because we have less number of troops, less resources, we only develop certain parts of Afghanistan, and by developing certain parts of Afghanistan, we create these model areas, so those who remain outside these ADZs, they see better life with us, and they will volunteer to say no to the Taliban. Afghan government right away rejected the ADZ approach. But by then, the Taliban had become a strategic threat. Before I want to elaborate further as to where we are now, I have to say, in 2001, 2002, Taliban were not entirely defeated. They were pushed out of Afghanistan. They had lost territory. They had lost command and control. They had lost their fighting machine. But as far as the leadership of the Taliban was concerned, they had gone to Pakistan, and in Pakistan they were protected by the Pakistani military in the tribal areas. Now, we all realize in 2007, 2008 that the Taliban have re-emerged, but the big attention is not in Afghanistan. We see signs of the blame game. Megaphone diplomacy starts. Afghans complain about lack of resources. International community complains about lack of competence and lack of a strong political will on the side of the Afghans to do something meaningful. But still there is no prescription as to how do you deal with this problem. And series of reviews start in Washington. Needless for me to say which reviews. You can find some of these reviews talked about in recent book, Obama's War. Well, then comes the most fresh and latest prescription as to what do you do with the enemy who has re-emerged. The prescription, the review says, surge in the foreign forces, more U.S. troops. Why more U.S. troops? Because they had for such a long time neglected to create a viable Afghan force. Now that the Taliban have come in such a big number and development of the Afghan national security forces will take more time, the easiest way to counter them is more U.S. troops. In addition, parallel to bringing more U.S. troops in Afghanistan, then they say we have to enlarge the size of the Afghan national forces as well. That is the phase where we are. So what is the problems of this phase? There are a number of problems with the current strategy. In the current strategy, United States still believes Pakistan is honest, or at least more than 50% honest. You hear these words, rogue elements in Pakistan, not very confident and certain about the assistance of the United States, not very confident and sure whether we remain in that part of the region, so therefore they have to keep their boys for the rainy days. Now, let us for a second think you do not remain in that part of the world forever. Does that justify Pakistan to grow and create these militant groups? I think no. The other problem with the current strategy is this. Let me, before elaborating the problems with the current strategy, I have to say every single U.S. soldier in Afghanistan is fighting with dignity and honor. I'm not saying this because I am here in the United States. My views are very well known. They fight for the US national interest, but in the meantime for protection of the Afghan dignity and honor. Without them, we will face massacre and disaster, and God knows what type of a future Afghanistan will have. Now, that said, what I explain as problem is in no way disrespect for the very honorable and dignified mission they are doing in my country. General Petraeus is trying to solve the problem by going to the villages, expanding and spreading the writ of the Afghan government. But there is a fundamental problem in Kabul, and I call it the problem of political theater in Afghanistan, political Kabul. The Kabul theater is detached from reality, and they are not partnering fully with the military mission. So you have political Kabul not totally buying and supportive of the mission, and you have the soldiers going out to the villages to kill the enemy. Now the question is this: which one is the priority? Special forces doing night operations, or a consistent policy to solve some of the outstanding issues with Kabul and make it a partner, a viable partner? We have to have a common and unified narrative. Without that narrative, without that strategic messaging, we will not be able to carry on the public either in Afghanistan or in the United States with us for the success of this mission. Sometimes back I gave an interview from my home village in Afghanistan to National Public Radio. By coincidence, I opened the website of NPR and I read the opinion of the Americans about what I had said. And I saw the narrative about this war has blurred. It is not as clear as it was on 14 or 12 September 2001, or in 2005, or in 2008. So Americans said, some of the Americans who had commented on my interview, they said, the comments of this guy does not make sense. He talks about history, value, this and this. Why we should go all the way to the other end of the world and in his valley, in those mountains, and fight for him? What does he mean when he says, whether Americans are here or not, we will defend our values? What do I mean? Before the 9/11, we were fighting the Taliban. And we were fighting for a pluralistic Afghanistan. We were fighting for a vision, not for empowerment of a faction. We were fighting for a day where Afghan women be treated as human beings and not as animals put in cages. And what I meant, I said, if United States leaves us, abandons us prematurely through a deal, through creating excuses that this is no longer winnable, political Kabul is very corrupt, it doesn't mean we will give up. We will continue, because we have not reached a stage where the enemy is defeated. You, United States, came to our country for very distinct three objectives: defeat Al-Qaeda, make the Taliban irrelevant, and create a viable government for Afghanistan. Now the question is, which one of those three have been achieved? In my opinion, we have managed or achieved the third objective, but not in a perfect manner. There are flaws and problems with it. Al-Qaeda is not defeated. Taliban are not defeated. What bothers everybody in Afghanistan and what has blurred the narrative for the war is the talk of reconciliation. We could reconcile with Al-Qaeda and Taliban on September 14, 15, September 20, 2001. What was the need for these billions and billions of dollars to be spent? It's the same enemy. And of course, if we reverse the time, we hear the speeches of major Western politicians saying failure is not an option. Now it seems as if failure is an option. And my key message coming to Washington is this: it is a winnable war. The nature of our enemy has not changed. The fundamentals are the same. People tell me after the surge, things have improved. I say, yes, things have improved. There are no bombs in Kabul. I hope there will be no bombs in Kabul. Suicide attacks have decreased. But has the surge brought a fundamental change in the basics? Has something changed in Pakistan? No. Have we captured, killed, or brought into the negotiations table the Taliban leadership? No. Have we defeated Al-Qaeda? No. So the surge has brought a temporary effect. Is the Afghan security forces capable of holding the ground that the US troops cleared today for us? No. Why? Many reasons, but the one reason I emphasize time and again, the narrative of this mission is not as it was 6 years ago, 4 years ago. People try to create a reductionist agenda, whereas the basics are the same Al-Qaeda, the same Taliban, the same deceptive Pakistan, the same global agenda for the jihadist groups. Now, a lot of people may ask, Taliban taking back part of Afghanistan, will they be able to threaten our key and national interest by possessing AK-47? Remember, when they did help Al-Qaeda to do 9/11, they had the same weapons. One. Two, think of it from another perspective. A ragtag group defeating 40 countries or creating a perception of defeat that by resolve and sticking to an ideology and converting fertilizer to IEDs and having sanctuary in the so-called tribal areas of Pakistan, you can bring NATO down. Now, this is a narrative for continuation of war. What is the solution? After resignation, a lot of people call me an element anti-reconciliation, anti-peace. No, that is not true. I see my dignity and honor protected in peace. My family is in Afghanistan. My daughters go to school in Kabul. I have nobody living outside from my family outside Afghanistan. As I said, I am purely local. So, what is the alternative if we don't want reconciliation from a position of weakness, where the narrative for continuation of mission is fragmented, where political Kabul is not fully partnering with NATO for whatever reasons? US media is more aware of it, and US institutions who are dealing with Afghanistan have in-depth knowledge of what are those reasons. I put it in simple terms. Let us DDR the Taliban, demobilize them, disarm them, take their headquarters out of the Pakistani intelligence basements, bring it to Kabul, push the Taliban to play according to the script of democracy. And if they win, why not? Allow them a chance to govern. But they will die in democracy. They will die in a country where law is ruling. Not gun, not IEDs, not a spread of fear and intimidation. The yesterday resistance in Afghanistan, which is easily named in the Western press as Northern Alliance, they were DDR'd. They did not surrender to a faction. They surrendered themselves to the rule of law, to the democratic process. A lot of them are marginalized politically. But they gave up their weapons. You can travel in the areas they were controlling with ease. NGOs are there. Civil society is active. I have been warning, and I want to reissue that warning without DDRing the Taliban, without without pushing them to declare who their commanders are, what is their list. A deal will be a disaster both for Afghanistan and for the United States. I want to briefly, very briefly say, what do I mean by disaster? Let's say tomorrow we have a deal with the Taliban, and that gives us a period of fake and deceptive stability. And that gives an excuse to reduce the number of troops significantly without seeing whether we have changed the basics or not. And the enemy remains as mysterious and as unknown as today, without us going to their roots. And then the fighting starts again. It will be very easy for the Western media to say, this is the habit of Afghan tribes. They fight. And we will be once again dropped from the attention of the world until you face another disaster and come back and say, okay, we didn't know that the enemy was not defeated, let's redo it. So the deal may bring a deceptive stability, but it will not bring a long-lasting stability where Afghans or foreigners will have confidence to invest and convert Afghanistan into a viable economy, and a state which will receive some resources for subsidizing its institutions, but not a totally subsidized state. So that is an alternative we are proposing, not from the position that I am out of the government, but as a political activist. You may say, well, nobody is talking about the deal, so am I talking prematurely, early, before something has happened? No. All of you know about bogus Mansour, a grocer who comes, and we are so desperate for a deal that they take him to the president of the country and say, he is the Taliban, talk to him. And worst, he is flown by a NATO airplane. This desperation for the deal. Why Mansour, in his third meeting, even if he was a real Mansour, brought to the presidential palace of Afghanistan? Because everybody is desperate for a deal. Why some subordinates were not entrusted with the task of negotiations? Did we dream of a Dayton or a Good Friday Agreement? That's what I have said to the media. Both were very lengthy processes, not started by bogus characters, but by the real ones. So I was asked, well, I was told when I asked some of the organizers of this conference, what is the expectation from me to talk to? Remember, I was trained to listen, and I am not used a lot to speak. So that's why I told you, if you find it boring, bear with me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to go ahead and open for a couple questions here for Mr. Saleh. Let's see. Where's the microphones? Okay. First question. We're going to call upon someone who has asked a question today. So let's. Is there anyone on this side of the room? In the back, here on the left.
Thank you. Kimberly Dozier with the Associated Press. Mr. Saleh, are you saying that you can see a time in the foreseeable future where it would be right to open up peace talks with the Taliban? What conditions on the ground do you need to see before your part of the country believes that they could have success?
This is a very good question, and it's a fundamental matter. Just to quote three speakers who spoke before me, because without quoting them, sometimes I will be accused of carrying my Northern Alliance sentiment for the rest of my life. And so my literature is from 90s or 80s. I want to quote these three gentlemen. Three of them said, Lashkar-e-Taiba is a creature of Pakistani military establishment. ISI was involved in Mumbai bombing. Lashkar-e-Taiba is working with Al-Qaeda. Ilyas Kashmiri is now becoming a very important operative or master of operations for Al-Qaeda. So we talk about all these proxies, but not the master of proxies, which is the Pakistan Army. The question is, what does Pakistan Army want to achieve? By saying to Washington, we are victims, going back to the Rawalpindi being the masters of all these proxy operations. They want to gain influence in the region. Now, they may tell you, look at the suffering of our people. Their people do suffer in tribal areas, in the expendable part of Pakistan. You continue to hear the news about suffering of people in tribal areas. The establishment is not shocked, but one bomb blast in Rawalpindi or in an inner cities of Pakistan, that's what they take very serious. So Pakistan believes that by promoting these proxy groups, even if there is a leakage, even if there is a spillover, it will be like fire in the servants' quarter. It will not burn the main palace. That is their theory. And for them, tribal areas is like the servants' quarter, even if it continues to burn forever. Now, what we don't see clearly is a U.S. strategy, a consistent policy towards the fundamental issue, Pakistan. It's a country which, despite your protest, despite the threat of sanctions, and despite a one-time sanction, they did the proliferation. It's a country which promised to you, trust us, believe us, 9/11 has changed us. I was with them yesterday in Muscat. They said, we have not changed. We are the same Pakistan. But you believed in them. Now, United States believes that by giving more money, more resources to Pakistan, you can convert their behavior from bad to good. But it is rewarding bad behavior which keeps them to continue to have that bad behavior. Now, I say, let us start negotiations today. Have we changed some of the very basics for which NATO went to Afghanistan? If not, so you sit with the enemy around the negotiations table. We are demanding them of what? They are not under pressure. Who are under pressure? The US military in the Afghan villages. They go and they kill the outer circle of the Taliban, the middle circle of the Taliban, but not the inner circle of the Taliban. The outer circle are the opportunists. The middle circle, all those commanders who go to Pakistan, receive training, receive resources, come back, and they lead these small groups. The inner circle is so well protected that a grocer can claim to be one of them and start negotiations. That is where we need to put pressure. put pressure on the inner circle, on the leadership, so they see the heat and come to talks and to terms. Now, demographically, in the next 20, 30 years, Afghanistan will be around 70, 80 million people, and Pakistan will be over 300 million people. They are stagnating in energy production, they are stagnating in education, they are stagnating in governance, they are stagnating in economy. Now, for them creating these proxy groups and create a literature of religious war and keep sending them to Afghanistan either to promote your agenda or get killed there, in either case, it's a win-win situation for Pakistan. So, I am not anti-negotiations, I am not anti-peace. I say we have not changed the basics to call for a desperate talks or negotiations with the enemy. And if we do, what is the plan B? What if we keep asking for reconciliation and it is July 2014 and the American public opinion is exhausted with this very long tunnel with no light at the end, and then we say, what? I do not see plan B. And because we do not see plan B, people like me who see the future of Afghanistan hanging on a cliff, we are preparing for plan B. We say we have no influence over NATO, we have no influence over Taliban. If NATO decides to leave, and if Taliban wants to continue the fight, who will be the victim? The majority silent. The civil society, the women, those who wish to live in a pluralistic Afghanistan. Now you may say, why Afghans are not mobilized, organized enough to do part of the job themselves? Very simple. As I said, political Kabul, the Kabul theater, has to partner with you for the sake of Afghanistan and strategic messaging, in creating a narrative which can both carry the Afghan and American public the same pace towards the victory.
Question in the back? I'm going to go in the back of the room.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Meredith Buell. I'm a news correspondent with Voice of America, just back from Pakistan. My question to you would be that we all know that this strategic review on Afghanistan is coming up next week. We presume it will be released by the White House. We heard some relatively positive remarks from Secretary Gates yesterday with President Karzai, and earlier in the week from General Petraeus with regards to how progress is going in Afghanistan. We're hearing a different message from you. If you had an opportunity to make 1 or 2 points in that strategic review that all Americans, all Afghans, all Pakistanis would see, what would those points be?
Again, a very good question. Let us construct a test for Pakistan government. Let us construct a test for the Afghan government. And let us revolutionize the speed of the development of the Afghan security forces and relevant institutions who are involved in good governance. Those are 3 points. There is no test. Pakistan, from 12 September 2011, is providing retail cooperation to United States. You have not earned a wholesale cooperation from that country. This individual or that individual, this Al-Qaeda guy or that Al-Qaeda guy. But Pakistan has not provided you with a wholesale cooperation. And this tribal areas seems today, both to you and to us, as if it is located in Mars. It is not located in Mars. It is sitting next to Paktia province of Afghanistan. You should say to the Pakistanis, either by July 2011, there is no Haqqani in Miram Shah, or else we will do the job for you. This ungovernable part of Pakistan, from where you have suffered, from where you claim your great leader Benazir Bhutto was killed, we will cleanse it for you. Let's construct a test. Those will be my 3 points. Without those tests, this laissez-faire way forward, where everybody will measure progress as it suits their interest, will not change the fundamentals. Remember, I am not contradicting the assessment of Secretary Gates or anybody else. I am saying, have we changed the fundamentals? The fundamentals have not changed. We should not adjust ourselves based on the mood of the enemy. We should adjust ourselves based on the intention of the enemy. The intention of the enemy is as fierce and vicious as it was on 10 September 2011. Their mood swings. One day they do manage to do a bombing, one day they can't. Probably they are giving us a deceptive perception that things are improving. Americans, you are right, your surge worked. Get your troops out of Afghanistan.
This gentleman right here. Please identify yourself.
Yes, my name is Mansour Al-Haj. I'm from Memory. You describe yourself as a politician, activist, but my question will be about you didn't talk about the ideology of the Mujahideen. Now, they have this ideology, they want to fight to receive Shahada and go to paradise. Mm-hmm. And I want to pick from the last sentence that you said, that why local people don't stand up and fight the Taliban if they truly think they are as horrible as you describe them. I mean, I'm saying that because we have Mullah Omar declared as the Amirul Mu'mineen for all the Al-Qaeda branches in Somalia or Yemen, and Osama bin Laden is declared as the leader of this terrorist organization. So now, in Somalia itself, Somalis didn't fight Al-Shabaab, for example. In Yemen, Yemenis don't resist the AQIP. So why is that? And this jihadi ideology, right, it's not a factor?
My brother, there is no verse in Quran or there is no hadith to say gate 1 to heaven is in Afghanistan. So I wonder why everybody who wishes to go to heaven should come and launch jihad in my country. I cannot find that verse in Quran, and I have not seen that hadith, the saying of the Prophet. And then there is the other greater jihad, and I can go into very details of that the greater jihad is self-making, piousness, being good. Why we always opt for the second jihad, which is the lethal jihad? There's something in work there. That is a very complicated, very deep discussion and debate beyond the patience of this conference. But coming back to your point, if Mullah Omar has a point, I'm sure if he ever agreed to come to Jamestown, they will not say the precondition is for you to remove your turban. They won't say to him that. He has no message. There is no narrative except killing. And I find it truly insultive to say the messages of true Muslims is only killing. There is no moderation. There is no vision for this world. That this world is only for Christians and Jews and non-Muslims, and we wait. And we wait in desperation and poverty to go to the other world. That is not the sort of message I get from Islam. So Taliban at best are a group. They do not represent the majority of us. And I say, I was fighting the Taliban before the intervention of the United States because of our beliefs. And we will fight again. It is our cause.
Question here in the front.
Thank you. I'm KT McFarland from Fox News, and I'm honored to be one of the directors of the Jamestown Foundation on the board. You talked about the fact that Kabul, political Kabul, and the United States are on a different page. What would be your plan B to replace the political Kabul with a Kabul that might be on the same page as the United States?
I do not have the temptation, the plan, or the proposal to create another front for the international community to handle. Not necessarily even a political front to create a headache for the mission. I say we should bring meaningful reform to make the political Kabul part of the mission. They should become accountable, they should become responsive, they should become accessible, and they should stick to the common narrative. What is that common narrative? As I said, from 12 September 2001 till today, have the basics changed? No, you will still have that problem with extremist groups. They were based in tribal areas, they were based in Afghanistan, they were pushed out of Afghanistan, they are in tribal areas and attacking Afghanistan on an everyday basis. So what does it take to make political Kabul stick to the narrative? There are plenty of ways. Constructing tests for all the institutions that are subsidized by your assistance to do their job better. Now, we should not wait. I totally disagree with this literature that the Afghans will start taking responsibility in 2014. No. There should be a deadline for the completion of handover. The Afghans should take responsibility from yesterday. My message is Afghan police, Afghan National Army should not be protected force. They should be allowed to do operations by themselves. The matter of casualties, again, it is a cause for Afghans, and their political leaders must promote that cause. We should not be motivated through an op-ed in New York Times or Washington Post or Fox News. That's not our media. We have our own media. Now, meaningful reform, strategic messaging, and also starting to hand over responsibility, not from today, as I said, it should have started from yesterday. What do I mean by handing over responsibility quickly? If you watch one of the PBS documentaries on Afghanistan, which was made 2 years ago, there is an episode in that documentary. It says, now you see NATO strategy connecting Kabul, political Kabul, with the masses. So there is a NATO helicopter flying 2 ministers to a village. Why should NATO fly us to our villages? They should say to a minister, tomorrow I'm going to be in that village and I want you to be there as well. The road is dangerous? Yes. What it takes to secure that road. It should not be purely a NATO mission. I just gave you one of the tests. There can be numerous tests which will shake up the political Kabul and say, this is our mission. If we fail, this failure will mean something. You should not praise the Afghan officials because they speak English, or because they impress Americans, or because they impress IMF. They must be able to impress the villages.
We've got time for one more question, then we're going to have a break. There's a question in the very back of the room. Just wait, please wait for the microphone.
Thank you very much. Said Zafar Hashmi from Voice of America Afghanistan Service. I had a quick question. In what you call the theater Kabul, what is the purpose of that? If you could elaborate why there is the what you call political theater. What's the purpose? What benefit it gives to the elite, if you could elaborate? And regarding the reconciliation efforts, is there any ethnical issues that is influencing, and was there any influence and pressure from Islamabad that led to your resignation? Thank you.
The definition of political Kabul is the segment of the society which is involved, who are occupying big positions, big businesses, big media, and are very active in the civil society, and they are benefiting from the security umbrella of NATO, but they have a different narrative. That is my definition of Kabul theater. And Kabul theater must be aligned with the mission. Now, your second question is about the reconciliation. Sometimes it is being said that the Taliban are Pashtuns and their stronghold is Helmand and Kandahar. So if truly Helmand and Kandahar is homeland and a strong base of the Taliban, then people should know Taliban are against music. And they know. 4 weeks ago, one of our rock singers, Farad Darya, went to Helmand. 30,000 people came for the concert. They knew it could be mortared, there could be suicide bombers, there could be Taliban snipers, there could be every other type of threat. And when I watched the concert, it was live on our national TV, I had heard these songs so many times in my life, and I was truly crying for half an hour. Crying to see how desperate people are for a normal life. 30,000 people accept the risk to come for a concert. Now, that means that if you have an alternative and it is meaningful and it is visible and it's acceptable and it is accessible, people will say no to the Taliban. But if political Kabul keeps saying, Taliban are the sons of the soil, where are they? And if bogus Mansour is brought to the palace for negotiations, then people get confused. Taliban are Pashtuns, but Pashtuns are not Taliban. That's my message. Now, whatever behind my resignation, I don't want to live in the history. It is gone. I have a new life. So.
Well, on that note, we're going to end our discussion today and thank him very much for that wonderful presentation. We're going to have a short 10-minute break here while the next panel comes up, so just stretch your legs for a second, but we'll come right back. Very well known and perhaps one of the world's greatest guerrilla commanders, Ahmad Shah Massoud, And he was asked by Ahmed Shah Massoud to head the Afghan Northern Alliance's offices in Dushanbe, Tajikistan. He served as an informal ambassador and coordinator of non-governmental organizations that handled contacts directly within Central Intelligence Agency. After the fall of the Taliban, he returned to Afghanistan and helped rebuild the country's intelligence organization. He was born in the province of Panjshir in 1972 and holds an honorary doctorate degree in analysis science from Clearly University. When I was speaking with Mr. Saleh today, we were talking about his education background, and he commented that I was born of war, and I never had a chance to attend a university because I was busy working and securing and defending the rights of his people from the native Panjshiri Valley. He's certainly someone that has created a great interest in Washington. He's very well respected by officials in and outside of the U.S. government, and General Hayden was extremely happy to hear that Mr. Saleh was coming today to speak at this conference, and he noted several occasions that Mr. Saleh is extremely well respected here. And so on that note, I'd like to turn the floor over to Amrullah Saleh, our keynote speaker today. He will be taking a few questions and answers after.
Institution building starts in Afghanistan, and I call it phase 3. In phase 3, a mistake was made with the approach of lead nation theory, every donor nation taking the responsibility to build capacity for a specific Afghan institution. United States takes the responsibility for building the Afghan National Army, Germany the Afghan National Police, United Kingdom takes the responsibility for narcotics eradication, Italy takes the responsibility for judiciary reform. They soon find out, after a year or so, that this stovepipe strategy is not going to lead to creation of a cohesive state. And now everybody regrets why we wasted so many years in that approach, because the result was not the results we all desired and liked. It is during the launch of this approach, lead nation, that Taliban re-emerged. They had already come back, but they had concentrated in the remotest parts of the country, in the villages, exploiting the lack and presence.
He speaks. Amrullah.
Thank you very much for clapping before I started to speak. In countries like Afghanistan, people do not clap for intelligence chiefs, so I'm not used to it. As I looked around, I see no clock, so it means I can talk as much as I like. But if I do talk a lot, please stop me. I have no prepared speech, and English is not my first language. And I want to speak to you from a very pure local and Afghan perspective. So bear with me. I will be very brief, reviewing the past 9 years, very brief. And then I will focus what is going on now and what is the way forward through lens of an Afghan. I was in Afghanistan when September 11 happened. So when we first saw Americans in our area, that's what I call phase 1, 2001. They say we want to defeat the enemy. And the enemy is Al-Qaeda, Taliban, and we partner with United States to defeat the enemy. It is a very popular cause, and the enemy crumbles in less than 2 months, and Kabul is conquered, we go there. So phase 1 is very short phase, and the enemy cannot resist because of the might of the US military and also the Afghan boots on the ground and the very good coordination that was between us. Phase 2, in phase 1, there was one assumption, that Pakistan is an ally, so when we push the Taliban out of the Afghan borders, they will be taken care of from the other side of the border. Then it starts phase 2, and phase 2 is a state building. During the phase 2, as you all know, the Afghans did their homework. We had the constitutional lawyer Jirgan, the democratic process was launched. Things were going very well, and Pakistan was still keeping the Taliban in hibernation, and they were not unleashed, re-unleashed. And that continued until late 2005. And late 2005
started running a little bit behind, and go ahead and finish up your lunches. At least we have an audience with a partially full stomach, so. Can I ask someone to pull the doors in the back, please? It is my great honor today to introduce to you our keynote speaker who's come a long ways for this conference, traveling here from Afghanistan, arrived in Dulles Airport early this morning at 6 o'clock without any sleep, has come immediately from the airport to Jamestown's event today. We're extremely delighted to have someone of such importance to speak at our annual conference. Amrullah Saleh served as the former head of Afghanistan's National Directorate of Security from 2004 to 2010. He left that post in June 2010. Prior to that, he was the he led the Department 1 of NDS, whose duties included liaison with the foreign minister, diplomatic and intelligence organizations, including those of the United States. In 1997, at the age of 24, he was appointed by the notoriously and very